I'm now going to show you how to fit an electrical back box to a solid wall. You would only use a back box like this on a solid wall. If you've got a stud partition wall, you would use a dry lining back box. These are designed to be fixed to masonry. So we're going to fit one of these, and it's going to be through a double socket. Before you do this, you're going to need to put a pair of safety glasses on and a pair of safety gloves. So if we take a look at the back box, it's about 25mm deep and it's a double metal back box. You can get deeper ones, and these are handy if you're putting thicker cable in, such as if you're installing an oven or a shower, you would use a deeper back box. For the sockets, you could use something that deep, maybe 25mm. If you were putting a light switch in, you could get away with a shallower box. It is a lot easier fitting these if the house hasn't been decorated, because you can then make a lot more of a mess, and then you can plaster after, and then you can decorate. This particular house has been wallpapered, so we've got a much harder job on here. So we're going to do it very delicately and very slowly, and we're going to install this back box, and then later on we can wire it up and we can have a working socket. So if you take a look down here, I've already taken this floorboard up and I've got my wires down there already, but they're not connected yet. So I've actually marked the wall, and I've used a laser level to get this socket to the same height as the other socket in the room. And then I've drawn around that using a pen. So I've now got an outline there where the back box needs sinking in to the wall. So in order to sink this in there as neatly as possible, we are firstly going to cut around it using a sharp Stanley knife, and this has got a brand new blade in. So first of all, I'm going to cut the wallpaper out. I'm going to save the wallpaper because we may need that for patching up later. So we can now get the blade behind there, and we can carefully peel off that piece. And we may need that piece later on for patching up. So now I'm going to cut the actual plaster again using the Stanley knife. This is easier in some houses than others. It depends on the actual plaster and the condition of it. Here you can see that it's very crumbly. Then once you've scored all the way around the plaster, you can then just chisel out the centre using a chisel. You don't need to use an hammer at this stage, unless your plaster is extremely tough. So if we now try the back box in there, you can see that that is a nice tight fit. But now we need to go deeper into the wall. And before you do this, you do need to be very cautious, because on some houses, the actual internal walls are only single brick thick. This actual wall is between this house and the house next door, and it happens to be a 9-inch thick wall. So if we go in there 10 or 15 mil, it won't make any difference whatsoever. As long as we're careful when we do it, it should be extremely easy. So I'm now going to measure the depth of the back box onto a drill bit. And that way, I'm not going to waste time by going too deep. So I can now use the tape and put that round there and use that as a marker. So I'm now going to put the safety glasses on, and here we have a cordless SDS drill, and I'm not actually going to use it on hammer action to begin with because these bricks are quite soft, so we don't really need hammer action. This is a powerful drill, so we're now going to pepper pot the old brick at the back, and that will enable us to break it out easily with the chisel. So now I'm just going to drill a series of holes into the brick to the correct depth. So you can see that we've now peppered the whole area using the drill. So now we can take a chisel and the club hammer, and we can now proceed to take the face off that brick. And you can see that that is removing the face of the brick where it has been drilled. So I'm now just going to clean up in this area. An important point is, don't use anything wet when you've been making brick dust, because it will stain quite badly. So you can see that the back box is now flush, but now we need to actually get the cable up into the back of it, which is a difficult part. So if we look here, we've actually got a seam in the wallpaper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut down that seam. I'm going to free the wallpaper at each side, and then we can pull it apart, and then we can channel out down there for our cables, and afterwards we can fill that in with some easy fill, and then we can put the wallpaper back and nobody will ever know. And it is a bit difficult here because there's actually lining paper on this wall as well, but we can peel that back So we've now successfully peeled back the wallpaper at each side. And that wallpaper is a bit difficult, to be honest, because the plaster is stuck to it in places. So now what we need to do is look where our holes are on the inside of the socket, and we need to chase out down there. Again, I'm going to use a Stanley knife because the plaster is only soft here. Now I've marked that, I can now take the back box out. And now we've got that piece of plaster out there. So now all we need to do is make an hole down the back of the skirting board, and then we can get our wires up from under the skirting board into the actual back box. So we're now just going to get the back box, and we're going to knock out 2 of the knockouts at the bottom, and then we can put the grommets in for the wires to go through. And we're now going to place some rubber grommets into the holes that we've just knocked out. And they will protect the cable from the sharp edges. So we've now got those in. So we can now put the back box back into position. So if you look on that side, we've got an horizontal slotted hole, and on that side we've got a vertical slotted hole. So that will give us a little bit of room to manoeuvre the back box once we've put the plugs in and the screws to hold it in position. So I'm now going to mark through there using a marker, and I'm trying to roughly get them centre of the slot. And now I know exactly where I need to drill my holes for the screws that are going to hold the back box. And if I just use the tape that's already on there, I can see that it's just a little bit deeper than where the tape ends. So I can now drill an hole there. So I'm now just going to place a red plug in there and a red plug in there. I'll just tap those in. I'm just going to tighten those screws up, which will hold the back box in place. So there's actually an hole already down the back of this skirting board, so we are lucky. But if there wasn't an hole down the back of there, you can make an hole using a screwdriver, or you could use a piece of copper pipe, such as a piece of 10mm, and you could actually bend that and you could push it down through the plaster and make a nice hole for the wires. So you can see that when I place the socket back on there, you're never even going to know that it's been fitted after the room was decorated. So all you have to do is feed the cables up the back, and then we just need to fill the gap there with some easy fill, and then we can stick the paper back and nobody will ever know that we've been here. So I'm now just going to feed the cables up the back of the skirting board, and I'm going to be extremely careful because the carpet gripper is very sharp, and it does have a tendency to prick you if you're not careful. So now the cables are in position, all we need to do is fill across there with some easy fill, stick the paper back, and then fit the socket to the cables.